my future is all about taking timber technology, sustainability and affordability forward in whatever shape, size project that it manifests itself in. But I'm looking to try and influence change for the better, for the planet, for the climate emergency, for the affordability crisis. And that's, if I can spend the next 15, 20 years doing that, I'll be pretty satisfied.
Welcome to the Architect My Business podcast. I'm Schlachter, your host, founder and CEO of MGS Global Group. We provide architectural drafting and rendering services for busy firm owners and designers. From starting out solo to now leading a team of over 45 and growing, I've learned a thing or two about making a business thrive. Whether you're thinking of starting, already managing, or want to take your business to the next level, this podcast is for you. Each episode is packed with simple, actionable tips in leadership, people, marketing, processes, and of course, profit. I keep things real. Like you, I've got no time for fluff. This podcast is brought to you by MGS Global Group. Now, let's get into this episode. Hi, everybody. Today, I'm joined by Richard Naish, founder and creative director of RTA Studio, and one of New Zealand's most acclaimed architects. Since launching RTA in 1999, Richard has led the studio to win over 100 local and international awards, including the NZIA New Zealand Architecture Medal and Home of the Decade Award in 2025. His projects, from carbon zero homes like the Living House to landmark innovation hubs like Sion and the Fisher Paykel headquarters, have redefined sustainable and contextual architecture in New Zealand and beyond. Richard, it's an honor to have you on the Architect My Business podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we dive into architecture, I have to ask you, do you still have time to do mountain biking? I read that in your bio.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's what keeps me sane. I get out into the forest with a group of buddies at least once a week, usually on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, that's great. That's a very dangerous sport, especially if you're on cleats. Because I used to do a triathlon back 20 years ago, and I've had a lot of bruises, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, look, we try to slow it down a bit these days. We're not quite as wild as we used to be when we were a bit younger.
So let's talk about your practice and why did you start architecture? Your path into architecture came a bit later in your studies, right? And you had a few challenges early on, both working in Auckland and London. What were those early years like for you, and how did they shape your outlook today?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because it's always tough when a architectural graduate leaves the university and hits the real world. And I happened to hit the real world in the recession, the sort of late part of the 1987 share market crash. So no one was employing anybody, and I spent my first year unemployed. I managed to pick up a private job doing a house alteration for a friend of my uncle's. And that gave me a glimmer of hope. But I hung on in there and got a job at a reasonably large New Zealand practice. And then I decided to throw that all away a year later and travel to the UK. And I think I sent out 25 application letters to all of my favourite architects in London and got 24 rejections and one request for an interview. And that got me kicked off for an architectural practice called ORMS in London, and I worked there for 3 years.
And so you moved back after 3 years, you moved back to New Zealand?
Yeah. You have a sort of a limited work visa relationship between New Zealand and the UK. So with a bit of travelling to Africa, that expired. So I needed to come back, and I returned to JASMAX, which is probably New Zealand's largest practice. I worked there for another 5 years, actually. So I was actually 10 years of experience before I made the big call to set up my own practice. And that was actually a considered move. I didn't want to go into private practice until I had gathered a really solid range of experience. So I was 31 in 1999, when I started RTA Studio.
So at this point, what type of projects were you good at, or what were you working on in your past experience working with different firms?
Yeah, well, I had a really great range. I worked with a director in New Zealand on private houses initially, but then I also was working on an international competition to design a telecommunications tower for Singapore. Then I was thrown onto a commercial project in South Auckland to design a industrial building for a mechanics workshop for huge big truck trailer units. And so I had this really great range of experience. The London part of it was really amazing because the practice, and most practices in London, is really do a new building. It's usually mostly refurbishment or adding a rooftop to a 5-story brick building. So I did a lot of really interesting repurposing, reuse projects in London. So by the time I had returned, I guess then I started moving into university building work as my last project before I set up RTA Studio. So I had that sort of tertiary education experience. So really well-rounded, and that's where the 10 years set me up really well before I started practice.
That's great. So what does RTA stand for?
Well, it actually stands for Richard and Tim's Architecture Studio.
Oh, okay. Is Tim the partner? Or
yes, Tim was for the first 12 years or so, and then we had different ambitions, I guess. So Tim left the practice, and then I became the 100% shareholder after that.
So what made you take the big leap? What was that moment when you said, I'll start my own firm? Did you get tired of working for other people? Were you moonlighting?
No, it was really something that I'd always wanted to do. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. When I left the university training, I thought, when will I do this? I need a few years, and the more years I got under the belt, the more I realised I didn't know. So I decided that I needed to have a few professional adventures before. Tim and I worked together in London. That was where we sort of started. Yeah. So he was another Kiwi doing the same thing, doing the overseas experience. We connected there for the final year, and we hatched a plan to do this. But even after that, we worked for 5 more years in New Zealand. So it was quite a considered move. But the reason I think I did it was, or always wanted to do it, was that I always wanted to be the sort of author of my own destiny, to know what I was capable of in terms of designing buildings, being an architect. And the best way to do that, of course, is to throw yourself in the deep end and have to make all of the key decisions.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions about business development, pipeline planning. But before we go into all the business stuff, I want to talk about the E-type house. I've seen that video, by the way, and I fell in love with that house. It's a house that I would live in. And I know you designed that for yourself, right? For your family?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you talk about the house? I'll drop the links or the YouTube video on the show notes, but can you talk about that and the award and the whole process?
Yeah, look, it was a cool project. I think my kids, I've got 3 kids, and the youngest one was about 6 or 7 when we moved in. So I've got 3, so it was a family of 5, and so this opportunity to purchase a site and build a house came up. Something I've always wanted to do, like design my own house, and that the challenge of doing it for a family of 5. I took on the challenge to try and make a house that span the whole life cycle of a family. So it wasn't about that time of 3 or 4 years of moving in. It was a house that we wanted for teenagers to be able to use in just a successful way as toddlers or young school kids, right through to empty nesters, which we're becoming now. So my youngest child now is 18. So we've been in there over about 11, 12 years. So it was all about trying to create a successful house that would span the life cycle of a family.
So you won the award in 2024, but you've already lived there for quite some time. So how did that, you just decide to apply for the award, or the organization picked your house? How was the selection process?
Oh, well, the way that award, the Home of the Decade, works is that they run an annual competition called the Home of the Year. And so we initially won that in 2014. And so there were, of course, 10 winners of the Home of the Year over the last decade, and they then sent judges around for a second time to select the best of those 10 houses. Yeah.
As a result of that award and publicity, did you get more residential projects?
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to tell. We're in, as I think the whole world is, a little bit of a slump in the economy, and the private house world in New Zealand has been slow. So we've had a quieter period, but we're picking up a strong bunch of houses about now. So that's probably some indication, because that was under 12 months ago that we won that award. So I think you could say our reputation plus these awards always gives us a sort of solid stream of work.
Yeah, you've won over 100 awards. That's really amazing in only 20 years, or how long? 25 years in business. So you have quite a diverse portfolio. Would you say, what's the mix of your project types? Is it mostly residential? I mean, the most recent project that I've seen is the Fisher and Paykel headquarters. That's massive. That's like a global brand. So can you talk to us about your different types of projects at the office? Yeah.
Yeah. I've always had a strong conviction to do a variety of work, because I think a variety of projects and typologies sharpens the pencil of an architect very well. So the small houses or the small commercial projects, particularly the houses, they have an intensity and a sort of a craft about them that is applicable to larger projects. But if you're only ever involved in commercial and institutional projects, they can sometimes lose their magic as a result of not having those smaller projects. So we've always kept that variety of scale, variety of typology. So we basically work over three broad areas: private houses, commercial offices and residential, apartment buildings and commercial buildings, and thirdly, education, right from primary through to tertiary. Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot. So let's talk about your Scion Innovation Hub and the design thinking behind this, the world's best timber building. I'm reading this article. Can you talk about that? It's stunning, by the way. The renderings and the three triangles. Can you talk about that and your timber conversation about the timber and what is that about?
Yeah. Well, look, before I talk about that building, I'll have to credit our collaborating architect, because we did a joint venture on this project with Irving Smith Architects, who are another firm of architects here in New Zealand. Yeah. And they had a particular strong interest in timber, and this project started as a competition. So the two of us joined forces to bring the timber and design together to make a winning entry for this competition. It evolved into a commission, and the client is the New Zealand government. It's a Crown-owned institute that is responsible for research into forestry and timber products in New Zealand. So they wanted to showcase what was possible with timber architecture and timber engineering. And the third party we should credit here is Dunning Thornton, the structural engineers, and Alistair Catternack from that practice has an incredible specialty, very clever in timber. So we designed this building and with this collaboration together with a diagrid construction. So they're triangulated timber pieces that have incredible strength, and triangulation is about the most strongest geometric form you can make. And we just set about trying to make the most beautiful building out of these triangles and diamonds to create an innovation hub, which is public facing at the lower level, invites the public in to understand what goes on this campus, but then it provides a collaborative hub for all of the scientists at the upper levels. It's a 3-story building. And I guess the coolest thing about this building was halfway through the project, we had this wonderful sort of triangulated diagrid structure, but all of the connection points, we had steel hubs to connect everything, because that was the sort of incumbent technology. And the client said to us, well, can we get rid of that steel? Can we just have timber connected to timber? Initially, the structural engineer said, no, look, that's just impossible. We need this stiffness at the joints. But then he went away and thought about it and came up with this really innovative idea of almost dovetailing the timber together at the joints. And that gave us the sort of breakthrough to this timber-to-timber jointing. And it went on to become, under the analysis, the upfront carbon is negative, so it's basically carbon zero embodied energy. And that whole sort of innovation around the timber-to-timber jointing it caught the attention of global architecture and structure around the world, and it won that award you talked about at the World Architecture Festival, plus another category in that same year for the best research building in the world.
So I see a diagram here of the dovetail joints. So you're not using any steel whatsoever.
No, that's exactly right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there is, in some of the photographs you'll see at the first floor level, where the two triangulated joints come together, there's a loop of steel. And that's not a structural element, that's what we call a seismic fuse, because it's built in a high seismic zone. So when it goes under a seismic event, what those fuses do is they absorb all of the energy out of the seismic movement of the building and deform. They can then be taken out and replaced so that it avoids any structural damage to the building. So that, again, is another really innovative feature of the building.
I love the triangles. Is it rooted in local architecture and typical New Zealand like architecture?
Well, yeah, I think what you're probably alluding to there is that we, as New Zealand architects, we work in sort of partnership with the Māori culture, the
Yes.
First Nations people of New Zealand. And it's becoming best practice this is a part of the evolving sort of nation over all of our arts and culture and everything, but acknowledging the original people of the land, the tribe of that particular area. There are actually 3 tribes, and so the 3 triangular entries represent those 3 tribes. They gifted the name of the building as well, and we also consulted on a number of features of the building that resulted in some of the narrative that's included in the facade treatment. So the glass facade has a fritting on it, which controls the amount of solar gain that enters the building. But that fritting is in a pattern that represents the sort of colours of the native New Zealand indigenous forest, but also the exotic forest. So that's also a metaphor of the indigenous people and the exotic people working together, and that's almost like a cloak around the building.
It looks stunning. The interiors are amazing, and the ceiling detail, I mean, with the patterns. Is this a soundproofing treatment as well? It's because I know when you design a building this open with a lot of glass, it tends to be a little loud. So how did you treat the sound in this building?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The ceiling of the atrium is acoustic performing, so it absorbs sound, and along with the ceilings of the open levels, level 1 and level 2, has a huge amount of acoustic material in there as well to stop that reverberation of the building and make it a pleasant workplace. And it works incredibly well because you've got a cafe downstairs doing wood-fired pizzas and craft beer with kids running around, and then you've got scientists having collaborative sessions on level 1 and level 2, and it is incredibly successful from an acoustic point of view.
Congratulations. It looks amazing. Now let's talk about the living house. What is the footprint again? It's very small with 4 bedrooms on each corner. No, 3 bedrooms, right? And a bathroom. In the middle is the living space. It's flat pack, carbon zero, and affordable. How did that idea come about, and what could it mean for tackling New Zealand's housing shortage? And maybe give a little bit of background to our international listeners. What's going on with the housing shortage in New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, look, New Zealand, the US and Europe and all of the world really is suffering quite a considerable affordable housing crisis. New Zealand may be I understand from our research that New Zealand is the 7th most unaffordable country in the world in terms of first home purchases. And so the ratio of salary and wages to house value is very high. So it really came about from a personal ambition to try and solve this problem. I got a little bit tired of hearing how expensive a government-built house was. So in New Zealand, it costs approximately, and this is all in New Zealand dollars, $600,000 plus land to build a 3-bedroom house. That's what the government was doing this at. So we had a sort of a design think tank or a design laboratory within our practice where we take on hypothetical projects. So we thought, how could we, a little bit like, I guess, Steve Jobs took the mobile phone and completely rethought what it looked like, how its functionality, perhaps the Tesla is another good example of that, starting from scratch, throwing away the rule book. And we took this approach with housing and construction. And so we decided that through our research, we understood 40% of the cost of a traditionally built house is in labour. And so we looked to try and minimise the labour on the build process. So that's where we conceived a flat pack CLT, cross-laminated timber panels. So there's only 36 panels. They're pre-cut in a factory. They arrive on one truck. They get placed in place by a crane, a truck crane. So the truck comes on the back of the crane. All of that happens within 1 week. And then everything we've thought about, windows, electrical appliances, we've thought about how do we just strip out the labour. And that's where we've come up with this product, which it's more of a product than a house. We're thinking about it as product design rather than house construction. It could be built in 6 weeks, 335,000 New Zealand dollars. So that's almost half of the cost of the government-built houses. And it's climate positive. So it's producing more energy over its 50-year lifespan than it has consumed in the construction and operation of the house.
What is 300,000 New Zealand in US dollars? Do you know? I just want to compare.
It's around about, it's not quite half, it's around about maybe 170 US dollars.
Yeah. It looks amazing. And I like the window treatments. For a small house, it's open because the main living area is looking towards the outside, right? So this was concepted in what year, 2024?
Well, yeah, it's been an ongoing project. It started around about 2022, the in-house research. We've just launched to market about a month ago, so it's really current. It is, just to answer that earlier question, it's 85 square metres. And the key to it is the volume in the living space. So it has a 4-metre stud at the high point of the living space. So we've learned through our other, what we call unaffordable housing projects in the office, that scale basically translates to a sense of space, the scale of volume. So by going high, that small living area with kitchen, dining, living space just feels wonderful with all that daylight coming in off both ends. But yeah, we launched to market just a few weeks ago and we built a prototype to prove it. We self-funded a prototype build. So that was great. We had lots of people through that to experience it. It's now been sold to a first home buyer. And this is a great story because the woman that bought this has tried to buy her first home, and we built it in Rotorua, which is a small New Zealand provincial town. She had 11 failed attempts of being outbid at the last minute, and when she was the first to put an offer in, it was fractionally over what it owed us, so we sold it to her. And when our manager here rang her and told her she had the house, she literally burst into tears on the phone. She so couldn't believe that she'd finally bought her first house.
And it's really, I don't know, but in the US, it's younger people are moving in with their parents because they can't find jobs. People are not getting married because having a wife and kids are expensive. And this is really great that you're making housing accessible to young families, people who don't have $1 million budgets, right? We want to have a decent and a respectable place to live, not in our parents' basements for the younger professionals. So that's amazing that you do a lot of high-end residential work, but at the same time, you're also doing this work, and it's quite diverse, your portfolio, not only types, but also budgets, right?
Yeah, that's right. I guess that's probably one of the cheaper, smallest budget projects that we do, that $330,000 house, right up to well over $200 million projects.
So let's talk a little bit about the timber construction. You've said that mass timber is the future of building. And if we're serious about saving the planet, what do you back timber so strongly over concrete and steel? Like, how do you reckon we're close to seeing this real shift in the industry?
Well, the short answer is that timber embodies carbon. It holds the carbon within it. So when a tree grows from a sapling to a full tree, it spends 25 years sucking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and locking them up inside the timber. So this is the principle of embodied carbon. Yeah. And that's the concept. It's not that complex. That a tree is like a sponge, that it's like a carbon sink. So providing that tree is kept in that inert state of timber and not returned to the ground to rot and release those gases again, then it effectively is a carbon sink. And that's the solution to climate change mitigation. So if every building in the world was built of timber trees sustainably. We can't deforest. We have to grow sustainable trees to make this happen. Then we're creating one enormous blanket of carbon sink around the world to keep all of that dangerous greenhouse gases locked up forever.
So I know people are using the word sustainable because it's the right thing to do. But then I know it's quite expensive too, especially when you're doing green buildings, green certified buildings. So what is the biggest myth you've come across about sustainable architecture, and how do we change that perception, especially with clients who might still be a bit hesitant?
Yeah, look, it's all about supply and demand, as everything in the world. So it's at its infancy, and until it matures as a mainstream construction material, it will always have that cost premium to it. But that cost premium is getting smaller and smaller, and it'll become even a cheaper way to construct. And the Living House project, while it's small, has proven that. It's proven that we can build from mass timber at almost half the cost of conventional construction for a house. And the Scion project and the Fisher and Paykel project, while they have come at a slight premium, and it would only be maybe 10% over conventional construction, that we can see the advantages and the speed of those builds. And so really the only thing that's holding that back is supply and the supply chain. And so the more CLT factories, the more mass timber factories we can build in the world, the more supply, then it will actually become a mainstream material to build with.
So I see I'm looking at the Fisher and Paykel project. It also has the triangles. And is this also with timber and glass? Because I only see the renderings. I don't have interiors.
Yes. Yeah, the Fisher and Paykel project, it's the global headquarters for Fisher and Paykel, which is a premium home appliance brand. And while they're manufacturing their product in the Northern Hemisphere, the design and prototyping occurs in New Zealand. And so there's 11,000 square metres of office building, which is in the mass timber. And that's basically all in mass timber, and that's where all of the people do their desk-based work. And then plugged into the side of that is a prototyping laboratory workshop, which does all of the prototyping and the design experimentation. So that's the sort of function of it. It's on a large campus. And so what we've done there is we've taken the Scion technology and we've taken it to a next generation that's more applicable to a larger project. It's 10 times the size of Scion. And we've also extended it beyond environmental sustainability. And we've looked at reforesting all of the leftover land with the pre-European indigenous species. It has an oasis in the centre of the building, because it's almost like a ribbon that encloses an oasis. And that provides all sorts of benefits, not just the planting, but it provides an amenity for the staff, and it also cleans and filters the air, the fresh air, because it's set in quite an industrial neighbourhood. Provides all of the air that's taken into the building comes from that internal courtyard. And then thirdly, we call it culturally sustainable as well, because we've done very deep and meaningful consultation again with mana whenua. Mana whenua is the word for the people of the land. And so there's a lot of meaningful narrative that's locked up in the whole building, not just the sort of token plastering of some images on the side of the building. It's all about, for instance, for one example of that is the front entry is aligned on one of the sacred volcanoes of the local tribe. So when you exit and enter the building, you're acknowledging that mountain. So it's a really complex project that's attempting to be socially sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and also culturally sustainable.
Yeah, I'm looking at the rendering with the little courtyard in the middle where people are sitting. It looks amazing. I have a question. I used to be a residential architect, and I used to specify Fisher and Paykel, they're very high-end appliances. Are they based in New Zealand? Is this a New Zealand company?
Yes, yeah, no, it is. It's a New Zealand company, started 50 years ago in Auckland, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know that. I see it. It's like, I want to buy their appliances. I can't afford it, but my rich clients can.
Exactly, yeah.
So I was just curious. That's good. It's a very recognizable luxury appliance brand. Yeah. Now, I wanted to move on to talking about building your practice and where you are right now. What are your biggest challenges or, I don't know, mistakes you made as a business owner, entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough thing building a practice as an architect because we don't get any business training at architecture school. And I guess that 10 years of experience was really valuable in Tim and I recognizing that.
If you're running a growing architecture firm, you're probably not short on projects, you're short on people. Talent shortage is real. Finding and retaining skilled professionals takes time. Meanwhile, deadlines keep getting closer. And when you're balancing growth with quality, it gets harder to maintain your project standards as the work piles up. We are here to bridge the gap. We provide qualified architecture staff on demand so you can scale your delivery without compromising quality. That's what MGS Global Group does. Whether you're overwhelmed with construction documentation, need BIM support, or your internal systems just aren't built for this level of growth, our team plugs in seamlessly. Think of us as an extension of your in-house team without the long hiring process. And because we work across time zones, your projects keep moving even after your office closes for the day. If your timelines are starting to feel stretched and your team's at capacity, visit mgsglobalgroup.com. We can get started in 24 hours. We're here to help you scale smarter and deliver faster with quality, consistency, and peace of mind.
We need to have a plan. We're not just going to put up our sign and say open for business and hope for the best. So we took that seriously. We made a business plan. We set goals. We set 2-year goals, 5-year goals, 10-year goals. We once a year took a break as directors and had a workshop to look at what we'd have achieved and whether we had exceeded those goals, or what, if we hadn't, why not, what the challenges were. We also took it really seriously, the financial side of the business. We employed, as soon as we could, a part-time office manager to take all of that load off our desks so that we could do what we do best as architects and spend that time developing the business. And so I think those sort of key moves were really important. We essentially set up RTA Studio as if it was a 100-person practice, but it only had 2 people.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, partly because we had ambition to be, not necessarily 100, but we had ambition, we're currently about 40, so we had ambition to be a 30 or 40 person practice, and so we needed to have systems in place to enable that to happen in the DNA of the initial startup. Yeah.
That's good that you had the foresight to set the systems early to prepare for growth. Other architects are just hustling to find work early on, but you already set that up, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't take a huge amount of time. We've always been very disciplined around time management. So it only takes a couple of hours a week to do some of these really strategical thinking or marketing things. So we'd ring fence a little bit of time each week to knock off a few of these essential tasks. It was very easy just to allow your time to be filled by the endless process of designing a building, but you have to discipline and take yourself out of that. But perhaps it's like choose a good time of the week, probably not a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon when you're too tired, but it was often maybe a Wednesday morning for the half from maybe 8 till 11. We'd just nail a few really important things, do some good thinking, and then back to business for the second half of the week.
I love that. So the early days, was it in terms of finding new clients? And I'm sure your kids were younger that time. Was it hard to manage like your young family and the business and all the things?
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, that was so. When I founded the practice at the age of 31, I just got married. My wife was pregnant with the first child. We had just bought a house, just started a business. So I don't think you could probably load much more into your life. But somehow I also took a really deliberate view about like work-life balance. So we barely worked a weekend in the 26 years. Only in rare emergencies have we had to do that. So I've always tried to get home by 6, not work any weekends, take 1 week off every 10 weeks. That's basically the school term. So every school holiday break, 1 week off, and then in our summer break, 2 or 3 weeks, so 6 weeks a year or something like that. Those things are so important. If you can't be a successful architect within that time allocation, then you're never going to be one. So you don't have to work like a nutcase to achieve these things. Having said that, I never really turn off. I'm good at de-stressing and enjoying myself, but part of relaxation in my head is actually thinking about those really cool projects. And so I really believe in the value of the subconscious thought, that if you keep it slowly ticking over in the background while you're riding roller coasters at Disneyland, and you're still doing product. When you come back to your task-based time frame, you're doing incredibly better than you if you've completely just forgotten about it for 2 weeks.
I think it's called the default mode of the brain. Like my biggest idea was when I was watching my son in the pool. I was just watching him and then boom, I had an aha moment. Or doing the dishes or cycling. I used to do triathlon, cycling for 3 hours. It's because you're just focused on the road and nothing else. And sometimes your best ideas come from that white space.
Yeah, that brings us back to the mountain biking again. So if I'm grinding out a big hill on my own, I'll often bike on my own sometimes, and that's when a lot of that thinking. It's really nice to just ponder a problem until your sort of exercise level gets to such an extent that you can't think straight anymore. But you've done some good work in that half hour of riding.
Yeah, it's great. I think health and wellness is such a big part of running a successful business, because if you're not mentally, physically well, it's really hard to work at a very high level, especially with all the things going on, right? My other question for you is, was there a transition period where you were, in terms of growth, right? I have a firm, Rich. I do architecture support consulting. We do a lot of drafting and documentation. For the first 10 years, I was at 8 to 10 employees. I was stuck at that 8 to 10 employee level. But then after year 10, now I'm like year 18, we're up to 60 employees. So I had like a ceiling. I couldn't go past that stage. At which point of your practice did you really soar? Like after year 10, year 7?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think there's a couple of factors here. One was that we had purposefully tried not to grow at certain stages. Yeah. So I did some really good sort of research, just with talking, collegial research, I call it, just by talking to older architects when I was younger about what's the perfect size of a practice. And the second factor, I think, is location and where you are in the world, what size city you're in. And in New Zealand, we're a very small economy. We've only got 5 million people in the whole country, and Auckland only has 2 million as a city. And so we're quite vulnerable to fluctuations of the market. And so having a large office in New Zealand comes with quite a bit of risk. If you've got 100 people and the work dries up, you've got a lot of problems. So we decided that 30 was probably the sweet spot after the talking. So we could have grown to 50, 60, 70, but we've limited it to 30 for quite a while. I guess it was a pretty straight curve. It went from 2 to 30, say, quite steadily and gradually over the first, say, 10 years. And then we sort of plateaued around 30. The reason we've gone to 40 is we've opened 2 little regional satellite offices, one in the South Island and one on the east coast of the North Island. And that we've got another 8 or 10 or so between those 2 offices. So 30 in Auckland, 30 to 35 in Auckland, 10 to 15 in the other regions. And that's a cap rather than an ambition. I think there's a misconception that bigger is better and bigger is more successful. We can also, from a business point of view, we can make just as much money in terms of the directors' salaries and being able to pay good salaries to our staff as any of my peers that might be directors in a 100 or 200 person practice. They're quite surprised that a small office like ours can be so financially successful.
I think it's better to stay lean, actually, and not spread yourself too thin, and really watch the profitability of your company.
Yeah, absolutely. You can be quite efficient. And one of the older chaps I spoke to 10 or 15 years back, he said, get to 30, and if you want to get bigger, go straight to 80. Don't be in between 30 or 80. That's when you start to have middle management and all of the sort of administrative support, but you don't have a big enough practice to be able to grind through it and then make the good money. So his advice was, don't go over 30 or get immediately to 80 or plus as fast as you can. And I know what he means there. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is your biggest mistake or lesson learned in the last 25 years?
Well, thankfully, we haven't made any major mistakes, but I think the lessons, if I was talking to someone who was going to start up their own practice, it is incredibly frustrating and difficult and emotionally quite hard work because you have to suffer an enormous amount of rejection. I think to be a practicing architect, it's about 9 out of 10 opportunities result in rejection, whether that be a competition entry, whether it be a competitive bid for a fee. You will probably lose 8 to 9 out of 10 of those, but it's the 1 and 2 that make it all worthwhile, and it's about that ongoing body of work. And you'll lose things not because you're not good enough, but it's because someone's undercut you with fees or because of some relationship. And relationships are really important to build positive relationships and ongoing relationships with clients that cause lifetime of repeat work. But relationships can also work against you on the other side of the fence. If sometimes you'll lose a job just because the client knows someone or went to school with someone or has part of the sort of rugby team or the sports team. And those are things that are frustrating. So I guess my advice to younger architects starting is don't take it personally. You're in for the long haul. It's about your body of work and your quality of work. It's not about winning every opportunity that you pitch for.
That's true. And I like the relationship building part. A lot of architects, at least here in the United States, work head down and they don't really have time to nurture and develop relationships outside architects and their consultants. Some of the biggest clients come from mountain biking or going to your kids' school function, right? So,
yeah. And other architects, actually. Never underestimate how much work you'll get from other architects. So some of the larger firms might get asked to do a project that's too small for them or that doesn't fit their criteria. And so the next question that potential client asks is, well, who could you recommend I go to? So that larger firm will recommend a good smaller or medium-sized firm. And we're doing this now. We'll have sometimes client ask us to do house alterations, and we generally don't do them. But we've got a number of young firms that will immediately refer that work to.
That's great. So now that you're in business for 25 years and people know you, what is the ratio of rejections? Is it still 1 out of 10? You win 1 out of 9 at this point in your career?
I'd have to say it doesn't actually change that much because the competition increases. When you're younger, you're not competing with the bigger firms, you're competing with the smaller ones. When you're mediums, when you're bigger, you've suddenly got a whole new pool of competitors. So I know that Richard Rogers, the British architect, famously said that they win 1 out of 10 design competitions. That's their success rate, and it's apparently one of the best in the world. So even those guys, the Zaha Hadids, the Rogers, the Fosters, all of them, that they're all competing against each other, and they might win 1 out of 10 competitions. So it's just part of life. You've just got to get used to it.
You got to get used to rejection, guys. Don't take it personally, right? So in New Zealand, is competition part of acquiring work? Because here in the United States, for residential architects, it's not really through competition. It's more like referrals. What is it like in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's true too. We very rarely get asked to do a competition for our house, and if we did, we wouldn't do it. No, it's more around competitions are reasonably rare. They're not a main avenue for us getting work. But if there was a large public building, for example, the government might run a competition for and those are some of the most coveted projects. So you can't say no. You want to get that art gallery. The latest one we were involved in on that front was for the World Expo in Dubai. New Zealand was going to invest $100 million in a pavilion at the World Expo, and they ran a selected competition, or it was open-ended. We got shortlisted down to 1 in 5. We collaborated with a Portuguese specialist that worked in exhibition space, and we pitched for that. We spent an enormous amount of time, and we lost. We didn't win, but it was an amazing experience, and we got paid a nominal fee, but it wasn't enough to cover our costs.
Yeah. So as a CEO of the company or the founder, what do you do on a daily basis? Are you designing most of the time, client relations? What is it that you do?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because around about the 20-year mark, the 20th anniversary, which is only 5 years ago, I basically decided for the next 20 years I'm going to need to drop some responsibilities and tasks because the firm's getting larger. I was the CEO as well as the CFO as well as the sort of head of HR and everything in a smaller firm. So I promoted a couple of my fellow directors to be the co-managing directors of the office, and I've since fired myself from all management duties, and so I'm now the design director. And in that, so I'd probably spend say 15 to 20 hours a week at the drawing board, shall we say, designing, and then the rest of the time is client relationships, also supporting the pitching for work process. There's quite a bit of time always involved around meeting clients, presenting projects, presenting credentials, writing requests for tender and all of those sorts of things. And mentoring is another big one. So design reviewing, mentoring the senior leadership team. We have every Friday, in fact, today at 3:30, I have an hour with each of the 10 senior leadership team members, so I meet with them twice a year and have a mentoring session. And that's all about succession and growth and preparing the firm for the next 50 years rather than the next 5 or 10 years.
That's a lot of firms, especially here in the United States or maybe globally. A lot of baby boomers are retiring and there's no succession plan. And I think that 60% of architecture firms globally are owned by baby boomers, right? And so either the firm dies with them or they have a succession plan. So that's really quite impressive that you're thinking of the next 50 years because you're doing such amazing work that you want to transfer knowledge and transfer information to the next generation.
Yeah, well, that's something that I've been very hot on in succession, and I'm still the majority shareholder, but I have 4 other shareholders now, and 2 of them are at least 15 years younger. And I talk about financial sustainability and design sustainability. So the firm has to be financially sustainable, and that means that someone other than me has to find the work when I'm gone. And that takes 10 years plus to get into the game of that. So that's all about mentoring the team to start finding work independent of my reputation. And then the second part is design sustainability, designing the work independent of my abilities. And that's a hard thing to do because it's hard to find. You won't just employ someone that can be an immediate replacement of a 30 or 40 year experienced design architect. So you need to bring them in younger and mentor them and train them. And so those 2 areas of design and financial sustainability are the future of the answer of succession.
So I have a question about the younger generation architects. A lot of US firms are struggling to find really good team members. Apparently, the younger people don't want to work that much, or they move from one place to the other. After 3 years, they move on. Do you have that problem as well in New Zealand?
Yeah, yes, we do. And we've definitely noticed from the post-pandemic hybrid workplace model is difficult to get people sometimes out of their homes. We've done a lot of work we've moved into a new office just after COVID. We've been here for just a year or 2 now, and we've come up with a slogan, and this design slogan we invented for the Fish and Parkle project, which is "Come home to work." So that's our provocation. Yeah, provocation was to all of the Fish and Parkle staff: come home to work. Let's make work better than home. And so that's what we've done here in our own small little office. We've created an office in an old industrial shed that has an amazing social space, has a full kitchen, has showers, has outdoor space, and it's close to a railway station, good public transport. And so we've made our office like home, and that's helped. And in exchange for that, we've said no hybrid work model. So you can work from home. We've got flexible hours. You could come anytime between 7 and 7, as long as you do 7.5 hours. And that means people that deal with traffic or drop off kids work within that 12-hour period. But working from home is only if your kid's sick or the traffic, there's a traffic jam and you can't get on the motorway or whatever. So that's possible, but only by exception rather than the rule. And so that's helped foster a real good sense of team. And we have good there's a lot, I don't know what the statistics are now here, but probably more than half the office have been here for more than 10 years.
Congratulations. That's because of your leadership and the culture that you've built. Because it's hard to keep people that long. I forgot to ask earlier, what do you do for marketing? Because a lot of architects don't have a strategy around marketing.
Yeah. Again, I think maybe New Zealand's different from the US, and our legal constitution and that controls the architect's professional just behaviour or whatever you want to call it, forbids us from advertising. So we're not allowed as professional architects to compete with each other, even though it's a highly competitive area. We're not allowed to advertise and say, employ RTA Studio on a billboard, we'll do this or that. So yeah, marketing is basically winning awards and getting published. And that's really it. So if we're always in the hot design magazines, if we're always in the media for winning awards, then the reputation is always out there, and that's the best form of marketing we do. So we will spend, in terms of a budget, we'll spend a healthy amount of money on good photography and also entering a number of international award programs like the World Architecture Festival, which we've had quite a bit of success over the last 10, 15 years. ESA in America, we've won several times, Architecture Master Prize. So those sorts of things we target because they gain a lot of publicity in New Zealand, and it's good marketing.
I like that because you're not selling, you're sharing your projects, and then it's like a lead generator. They come to you because they see you everywhere in every publication. That's why I really appreciate you talking to me, because when I saw your digital footprint with 100 awards and articles, I was like so excited to meet you, Richard. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, and I thank you for the invitation. It's been nice talking to you.
Yeah, so I just have a few more questions if that's okay. Any thoughts on AI? Are you using any AI tools?
Yeah, that's a really big topic. It's an area that's going to change our world. It doesn't matter whether we're architects or engineers or doctors and nurses or whatever. It's going to change our world faster than we probably think. We're not actively engaging in any particular tools right now, other than the usual sort of graduates using ChatGPT to write some emails and things like that. But then we've got an AI policy about that, because as we all know, they're not more intelligent than humans yet. So they write what they think's right, but it's not right. So it has to be reviewed and nuanced.
Yeah.
But in the architectural design world, my theory is that currently AI is very good at scraping the past and putting it in the present. But what visionaries do, what creatives do, is we invent the future. And any AI bot can mash up some Le Corbusier and some Richard Rogers and make a wonderful sort of looking building. But it is just a mashup of the past. And what real successful architecture is making architecture for the future. And a time will probably come when AI intelligence can maybe have a crack at that. But I teach architecture as well at the Auckland Architecture School University. And it is such, when you teach it, you realise how difficult it is as a profession, and how the human mind, the most intelligent computer on the planet right now, how hard it is to learn it as a discipline, and it takes a lifetime to become good at it. So I don't feel threatened in my lifetime, but I do worry about the next generation.
Yeah. So what is the next thing for Richard Naish? What excites you? What does the next year look like? Any exciting projects, professionally, personally?
Yeah, we're really looking forward to the Fisher and Paykel building being opened in less than 12 months. And that's going to be really a big feature of next year, and a lot of publicity will come around that. But look, my future is all about taking timber technology, sustainability and affordability forward in whatever shape, size project that it manifests itself in. But I'm looking to try and influence change for the better, for the planet, for the climate emergency, for the affordability crisis. And that's, if I can spend the next 15, 20 years doing that, I'll be pretty satisfied, I reckon.
Any parting thoughts for young architects wanting to start their firm, or for the next generation of architects?
Yeah, look, I mean, having just talked about AI, I think that we need to focus as architects on the analog, or the acoustic, shall we say, acoustic versus digital. We are human beings. That'll never change. From the earliest time of human existence, we respond to the combination of mass, volume, light, shadow, and the combination of those things makes architecture. And so I guess my message is, keep it human, keep it analog, remind ourselves that we're not machines, and that if machines are designing buildings for us, they're very unlikely to be buildings for humans. So we've got a great role going forward as creatives, and it's just the challenge will be navigating how we practice in that new world that's evolving around us. But we're the luckiest people in the world, I think, architects, so we should just go for it. Take the handbrake off and just go hard.
Thank you so much for our conversation. I like what you said about we're the luckiest people on earth, architects. So that's a high note. I really enjoyed our conversation, Rich.
Awesome. No, it was really fun talking to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Architect My Business podcast. If you want more, head over to architectmybusiness.com for more episodes, show notes, and links to everything mentioned in this episode. Don't forget to catch our mini shows, Her Space, Ask Aya, and our main show, Architect My Business. If you enjoyed our episodes and want to hear more, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your feedback really helps us grow. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye!